Some tracks go beyond chart success to define a decade. So, cue 1978, cue the Bee Gees.
The idea was to get a groove that everybody could dance to.
The way they created the song broke boundaries.
It changed the way people thought about recording, and it also changed the way people thought about dance music.
But the band's huge success as disco swept the planet came at a cost.
As a recording act, they were then dead.
It's 1976 in New York, where a magazine article is creating a stir.
An Englishman named Nick Cohn wrote a cover feature for New York magazine called The Tribal Rights of the New Saturday Night.
My friend Nick Cohn, who's a very good writer, was staying with me in New York, and he went to Brooklyn and discovered this whole sort of subgenre of people going out on Saturday nights to dance in discos. It was about the return to like 50s values of getting dressed up and spending all your money on one night.
Robert Stigwood, the entrepreneur, bought the rights to this article to make a film, Saturday Night Fever.
There's a lot of dance scenes in the movie, so my job was to get some songs. Big question was who would write the score, because there were scenes that really required original songs. And of course, Robert had that wonderful asset called the Bee Gees on tap.
Don't shed a tear for me, no.
The Bee Gees' career had seen the former child stars go on to embrace folk, soul, pop, and land a UK #1 hit in 1967, the year of the psychedelic summer of love. And the early 70s had seen the steady stream of hits continue.
The Bee Gees, for me, have had several lives. They've seemed able to constantly reinvent themselves to fit the moment, to fit the music, to fit the location.
But no one could have foreseen what would happen next, as the movie being planned by their manager, Robert Stigwood, was about to turn the Gibb brothers into global disco stars with songs like Stayin' Alive.
Robert Stigwood called Barry when I was with him one night, and Barry Gibb was in northern France mixing a live album. Anyway, we turned up there, Robert and I, with the script and told them about the movie, which I'm not sure they were that interested, to be honest, and I left the script for them, but I'm pretty sure they never read it.
They were at the Chateau d'Auroville, which Elton John had called Honky Chateau. The wonderful thing about the Chateau was there was nothing else to do for miles around. So you had to concentrate on your music.
About 2 weeks later, lo and behold, a cassette arrives from the Gibbs with the most extraordinary contents. 5 demos of what would become 5 iconic songs.
One of the tracks, Night Fever, would not only become a UK #1 in its own right, but also provide the starting point for an even bigger global hit, Stayin' Alive. All down to the brothers having to think outside the box when recording at the Honky Chateau hit a snag.
Sadly, at that point, Dennis, our drummer, his mother had got really ill and he had to drive back to Cardiff. So we've got a song that we want to record, Stayin' Alive, but we have no drummer.
So they took 2 bars of the drums soloed from Night Fever, put it on a 1/4-inch tape and cut it up and looped it over and over and over.
So it's the drum track originally recorded for Night Fever, slightly slowed down on Stayin' Alive.
Now, this is Dennis's loop with a few overdubs. Okay, oh, there you go.
It's a compelling groove that's lost none of its power, even now after more than 40 years.
So Stayin' Alive is the first ever commercial record that used a drum loop going completely through the record. Nobody had done it before.
The thing about Stayin' Alive is it's not really a dance song, it's a walking song. I think that's part of its appeal.
And nobody walked to that majestic beat quite like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever's iconic opening.
The shots of Travolta's feet walking along those streets, it was new, it was sexy, it was exciting, it was different, and it was dangerous. It's such a simple idea, but it's a strut, isn't it? And that strut tells you so much about who this guy is.
Away from the film, the Gibbs had a go at strutting themselves in the video.
The Bee Gees are trying to look similarly full of swagger in that music video.
The song featured a recently discovered vocal style, rapidly becoming the band's new trademark sound.
Back in the 60s, Robin Gibb had been the principal lead singer. When they started doing more of an R&B tilt, a lot of the R&B soul music at the time had falsetto singers.
I didn't realize I could actually sing a song in falsetto, but I'd always admired Brian Wilson and Frankie Valli. So we thought, hey, you know, what the hell? Let's make more records like this, it's fun. And we can play all these new games with this so-called new toy.
The lyrics are about angst, they're about struggle, they're about the underdog. Going nowhere, somebody help me, somebody help me. It was the Bee Gees singing about New York, but singing about New York from the perspective of somebody on the pavement, not the perspective of somebody in the penthouse. This was about surviving the city. Music loud and women warm. I've been kicked around since I was born. And it's not the kind of thing that you'd ever heard from the Bee Gees before.
This song is actually about the struggles of living and surviving on the streets of New York City. This idea of struggle, but hope. The main riff comes in on a minor chord. But there's always this extra chord that comes along to counterbalance, which is a major chord, which to me is like the idea of hope. So this is struggle. Hope.
Whatever the musical genre or subject matter, one constant was the band's special vocal blend.
Their harmonies are unique in a way. I think it's something to do with them being brothers, and they've sung together since they were small. It somehow comes across, it's effortless with them.
Absolutely perfect in timing, absolutely identical in pronunciation and phrasing, and making it sound like it wasn't technical at all, like it was just the easiest thing in the world.
Those 5 songs the Bee Gees wrote in France would make up side 1 of the film's 45 million selling soundtrack album.
Saturday Night Fever was a number 1 album for over half a year in the United States.
Your eyes in the morning sun, I feel you touch me.
But the thing is, when anything is at a pinnacle, not just a group, but when a movement musically is at a pinnacle, it's one step away from its own demise.
They were suddenly stuck, to their astonishment, with being identified as a disco group because it was a movie about discos. And the whole disco thing had peaked so high that there was a long way to fall, and people had just had enough.
How deep is your love?
There was a DJ in Chicago called Steve Dahl who promoted the Disco Sucks movement. What even he didn't realize was how successful this would be, and it turned into a riot.
People were burning disco records and all sorts, and their careers really suffered in that moment from sort of having the biggest selling albums to suddenly, we're going to forget about the fact they're great songwriters. You know, we're just going to go, the Bee Gees are disco and we hate disco, so we hate the Bee Gees.
Then, of course, came the wilderness period, you know, which was never something we quite understood because we didn't think we were a disco group. But everybody else seemed to think we were.
The Bee Gees found that through no fault of their own, the hits had dried up, so they needed a plan B.
During the years when they themselves were not saleable, they were still having number ones, but just for women and the greatest female stars in the business.
Why do you have to be a heartbreaker?
The songwriting skills behind Stayin Alive hadn't gone away. They were being used to create career-defining hits for stars like Barbra Streisand, Dolly Parton, and Dionne Warwick. Whose Heartbreaker is like a Bee Gees record with a guest lead vocal.
Why do you have to be a heartbreaker when I was being what you want me to be?
On Diana Ross's Chain Reaction, it's the same story. The classic Bee Gees sound with a Motown diva in the mix.
And the Bee Gees as songwriters are absolutely brilliant, but what's so amazing is the ability to be able to write for other people as well.
Today, although Morris and Robin are no longer with us, the brothers' achievements are justly valued, and that's especially true of Stayin Alive.
All those tunes have really, really lasted the test of time. They'll still fill any dance floor. You know, Bee Gees rock.